Hello and welcome to Song Meanings and Origins. Today we're going to talk about my song, The Devil and Mr. Jones, from the album Raised by Bats. And as usual, we're going to start with the meaning. Now, the meaning of The Devil and Mr. Jones is really quite simple. It's about a relationship with an individual. And there's a devil who has some things he has to say, kind of like the devil on his shoulder. And then there's an angel on his other shoulder who has other things to say to him. And to be a little bit more literal, this song is about the actor Doug Jones. Now, many of you know him as Pan from Pan's Labyrinth. Some of you know him as Abe Sapien from the Hellboy movies. And most recently, he was in the Oscar-winning film, Best Picture, in fact, for The Shape of Water. So something that can be said about Mr. Jones right away is that he is almost always completely covered in prosthetic makeup. He almost always plays monsters. And I've always said that he is the Lon Chaney Jr. of our generation, but other people say that too. I like to believe I coined that phrase, but maybe I didn't. I don't know. I like to believe that. I also happen to be extremely privileged to know Mr. Doug Jones personally as a friend. And I love this guy. He's not only somebody who's really a lovely fellow, but as an artist, you know, to be somebody who plays monsters, that's something that's very close to my heart, very near and dear to my heart, because I love monster movies. I like horror films and I like science fiction films, but creature features are specifically what I love the most. So the meaning of the lyrics go a little something like this. It starts out with the first verse that says, he sits in the dark looking into the glass. That glass is a mirror. So he's in a dressing room and he's looking into a mirror with his hands in the jar. It's a sticky white mess. Now, I'm taking a poetic license here, a little poetic liberty, because I'm imagining that the way he removes his makeup is with cold cream, which is very old-fashioned. I'm sure nobody uses cold cream anymore. I bet everybody now uses Ben Nye Bondoff or something like that. But I like the image of him sitting in an old-timey mirror and he's using this sort of cold cream to put on his face to remove the glue from the makeup, probably Prozac. He applies it and he wonders, how'd I ever get here? Piercing his reflection as he pulls off an ear. So to someone who doesn't know what this song is about to begin with, you know, they have this image of this guy looking into a glass, perhaps a mirror or something else. He's putting white cream on his face. He's asking himself, how did I ever get here? And then he starts taking off his ear. So it sounds very, very otherworldly and very strange, but it's actually very matter of fact in the world that the song is set in, because I'm sure Doug Jones very often has to take off ears, probably every day that he's at work. So then the second verse says, "'Neath a sign reading exit by the backstage door, his fans are collected for a glimpse at the star. He emerges and they wonder, oh, how can it be that this angel is the monster that we've all come to see?" Again, I'm taking some poetic license because I'm thinking of it more as like in a theater setting where after a Broadway play, people will collect by the backstage door to meet one of the stars. Probably doesn't happen as often on movie sets, but I'm imagining that it does for the sake of the story of this song. You know, so there's the exit sign and he comes out. But the thing about Doug Jones that you notice right away if you've ever met this guy is that he's really sweet and really lovely and just a really great guy. But he plays monsters, you know, so there's this duality. And there's this strange juxtaposition between the real him who's so sweet and the creatures he plays, which are very often monsters. Well, then we get into the chorus. And the chorus is interesting because it's a collection of references to projects that he's been involved in. So it says, in the labyrinth, in that lab you're in. So the labyrinth obviously is Pan and Pan's Labyrinth. Now, the thing about that lab you're in is, to be completely honest with you, I wrote the lyric before I thought of the reference. I thought, nothing rhymes with labyrinth. In the labyrinth. What rhymes with labyrinth? Nothing. The closest I could come up with was in that lab you're in. But then I had to go into his career to find out if he had ever done anything where he was in a lab, because the rhyme was great, but there really wasn't a project I could think of. And then luckily he ended up doing this short film, or rather a web series called Research, in which he played a scientist with no makeup on, in fact. And in that, he is in fact in a lab. But then after that, obviously now Shape of Water, he spends a lot of his time in a lab. So we'll just pretend that line is about Shape of Water. And then it goes on, in the watery depths of hell, boy, you were so renowned in the underground. That is a little play on words, because if you combine the two sentences, in the watery depths of hell, boy. And because he plays Abe Sapien, and he's always in the watery depths as Abe Sapien in the Hellboy series, that's kind of how I made that work. Boy, you were so renowned in the underground, even dead, in a tale where the witches dwell. So he's so renowned in the underground, meaning literally underground, when he played Billy Butcherson in Hocus Pocus, in a place where the witches dwell. And that's what that line's about. Eating all you know as a Wendigo. So he plays a Wendigo in a project by Larry Fessenden, part of the series Fear Itself, called Skin and Bones, where he plays a man who goes out into the forest and he comes back as a Wendigo and hence as a cannibal who wants to eat his family. On a board soaring out to space. That's a reference to Silver Surfer. Selling ice cream when we are at the end in a war between heaven and hell. And that is a reference to the ice cream man demon that he plays in the movie Legion. So that is what the chorus means. In the labyrinth, in that lab you're in the watery depths of hell, boy, you were so renowned in the underground. Even dead in a tale where the witches dwell, eating all you know as a Wendigo, on a board soaring out to space, selling ice cream when we are at the end, in a war between heaven and hell. So those are all references to films he's been in. And that brings us to the devil. And the devil says, "This is your fate, Mr. Jones, my dear," said the devil to dear Mr. Jones. "You'll be loved by the millions and great at your task, but no one will see who is under the mask. Cover your face, Mr. Jones, my dear. It gets hot as hell under the foam. And like me, you will be in a crowd, yet all alone." And what the devil's saying here, obviously, is that because Doug Jones's career is primarily as somebody who plays monsters, he's almost always under makeup. So his creatures that he plays are beloved, but a lot of people may not know who he is as a person. And part of the joy of writing the song is hopefully introducing people to Doug Jones, the man, underneath all of that prosthetic makeup. And so the devil, being the devil, is playing his own advocate. He's playing devil's advocate. He's saying that you'll be famous and you'll be loved, but only as long as you stay under all of that foam rubber. And then we get into the next verse, which is in Spanish, which a lot of people have questions about. But don't worry, I'm going to clear it up for you right now. Lo sabe Guillermo del Toro, el gran director. And that literally means Guillermo del Toro, the great director, knows this. We don't know what this is yet, but he knows it. También hubo Ortega, que lo vio en este señor. And Ortega is the last name of a gentleman by the name of Kenny Ortega, who was the director of Hocus Pocus. And what the sentence means, también hubo Ortega, and there was also Ortega, who saw it in this gentleman. Who saw it. Again, we don't know what the it is, but he saw it in this gentleman. Story saw it glimmer, and Fessenden's known it for years. Story refers to the last name of Tim Story, who directed Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. So Story saw it glimmer, quite literally probably, because Doug Jones was probably glimmering as the Silver Surfer. And Fessenden's known it for years. And Larry Fessenden, who's also a very good friend of mine, is a horror film director. He was the fellow who directed Doug Jones as a Wendigo in Fear Itself. And Fessenden's known it for years. And what we're talking about, well, actually, I shouldn't spoil the surprise. The next line is, "It shines from within him, through the growls and the moans and the tears." So what is this it that everybody knows of? What is this it that these famous directors know about, people who have worked with him? You could say it's his talent. It shines from within him, through the growls and the moans and the tears. But I think mostly what I mean is his goodness, the fact that he's just such an incredible person, he's such a talented person, he's such a lovely person to work with. I actually had the pleasure of being in a film with him finally. I play Romanian doctor in the Nosferatu remix that he's Nosferatu, in which he plays Nosferatu. Sadly, we were not on the set at the same time, but if it was one of my goals to be in a film with Doug Jones, and it was, I'm at least getting a little closer. So that is what that long contested verse is about. Here's where things get a little strange, because now there's an angel. And the angel says, "Show us your face, Mr. Jones, my dear," said the angel to dear Mr. Jones. "It's a crime to the heavens for even a while to hide for a moment that beautiful smile. Show us your face, Mr. Jones, my dear," said the angel to dear Mr. Jones. "You are loved, and you know you will never be alone." So the angel is the counterpoint to the devil. The angel's saying, you're so loved, you're so talented, and you're so loved that you don't have to wear all of that prosthetic, because people will accept you as an actor with or without the makeup. And it's really delightful to see that he has in fact done a lot of acting roles without the makeup. But as a monster lover, I do love the monster roles. And that is what the meaning of The Devil and Mr. Jones is all about. And now to the origin of the song. Now you're probably wondering, what is there to tell about the origin of the song? You just told us so much about Doug Jones, but you don't know how I met Doug Jones, and it's actually a really, really funny story. Now I'm going to lose some horror host / goth points here when I tell you that for a great deal of my childhood and well into my adult life, I was terrified of haunts. It's true. I could deal with the Haunted Mansion at Walt Disney World, but those haunts where you walk in and people chase you around and scream at you and startle you drove me really, really crazy. I was terrified of them. I'm not going to get super mushy and tell you all about my awful childhood. We'll save that for a Gothic Homemaking Presents video. But I got yelled at a lot as a child, and I was bullied a lot, and I don't like being startled. I don't like being startled. I don't like people jumping out with the intention of pretending they're gonna hurt me, and it freaks me out. So for a long, long time, I did not ever want to go into one of those haunts. And this is a true story. I was performing at a haunt in Long Island. I forget the name of it, but I was booked to perform at the haunt. And I love performing. I was happy to go and do it. And when I was done, the owner came up to me and my then girlfriend, who was a huge horror fan, and he said, "Hey, so now that your concert's over and now that the fans have gone, we want to invite you to go through our haunt." And I said, "Oh, no, absolutely not. I'm not walking through your haunt." And they said, "You have to. The cast is so excited that you're here. They've been working extra hard to be extra scary." And I'm like, "No, there's no way I'm going in that thing." And this conversation went on for a while, and then I started to see the looks of how disappointed people were that I wasn't going to go through the haunt. And they were looking at me kind of like that, with that like Long Island Italian American, like, "Oh, you're too good for us" kind of thing. I thought, okay, I guess I have to go in this thing. So my then girlfriend Audrey, she was very tall. She was about 6 feet tall. And she loved those damn things. And I told her, I was like, "Look, I'm gonna hide behind you, okay? Like, I'm literally gonna stand behind you, so you're gonna be my protection from people yelling and startling me." And so we walk into this thing. I had my face buried in her shoulder blades. I had my hands on her shoulders, and I just closed my eyes and I was walking behind her. I made it about of a fifth of the way into this thing. This is a true story. And all of a sudden, this guy dressed as Frankenstein's monster jumps out like, "Rah!" And I lost. I said, that's it, I've had enough. And I said, "I'll meet you at the end." And I ran through the haunt to the exit. And this is a true story. As I was running, I heard the guy dressed as Frankenstein's monster break character, and in a Long Island Italian American accent, he says to my then girlfriend, "Your boyfriend's a fag." And I didn't care. I just ran and ran and ran. So that gives you some indication of what I was like inside of a haunt. And I'm embarrassed to say it because, you know, I love horror in lots of other ways, but not in that way. Well, cut to many years later, I get a phone call from Fangoria magazine. At this point, I'd been performing quite a lot, and they said, "Hey, we want to invite you down to Universal Studios in Orlando for the unveiling of their horror, I think it's called like Halloween Horror Nights or something of that nature. I wrote myself a note. What was it called? I don't know what it's called. Horror Halloween something. You know what? It's a big amusement park. They kind of dress it up for Halloween. And I said, yeah, well, what is my role? Am I performing? They said, no, you're not performing. Are you serious? I'm not. You're going to fly me to Orlando and I'm not going to perform? They said, no, Fangoria Radio is going to broadcast from there. So we just want you to come down and talk on the radio. And I thought, okay, I think it's maybe a waste of your money, but, I'd probably be better if I was performing, but they didn't wish for me to perform. And I said, okay, I won't perform. Debbie Rochon, a very good friend of mine who is a horror film actress and director, was the one who had recommended me, I think, and that's how we all ended up down there together. So I say, who are the other guests? They say, well, Debbie Rochon and yourself and this actor by the name of Doug Jones. And I had no idea who Doug Jones was at the time. So we fly down to Orlando, get to the hotel, check in, and at like 6 p.m. or whatever it is, we head over to Universal Theme Park. And there's a stage, and they're filming the entire thing because obviously everybody wants to watch radio, right? So, and I have a face for radio, so I'm glad the cameras were there. So we're all sitting there. I meet Doug Jones, nice fellow, and we convene. I said, all right, so we're going on the radio right now? And they said, well, no, you can't go on the radio yet. You have to go through the haunts. And I said, what? They said, yeah, you have to go through the haunts. We have 13 new haunts. And you have to go through all of them. And I was like, no, I'm not going through the haunts. They're like, you have to go through the haunts. I said, why do I have to go through the haunts? They said, because that's what you're going to talk about on the radio. Oh my God. So I pulled Debbie Rochon close and I said, you don't understand. I can't go through those things. I'm going to have a complete meltdown. She said, don't worry. You can hang out with me. It'll be fine. I thought, oh, this is a nightmare. I can't believe I said yes to this. I've got to walk through not one, not two, but 13 haunts. So we go to the first one. And I am, I think, digging my fingers into poor little Debbie Rochon. And I'm hiding behind her. And we're walking through the thing. And I don't know what the hell happened in that haunt because my eyes were closed. And I honestly, I might as well have been inside of a cocoon the whole time. And we get out on the other end. And it's like, all right, 12 more to go. So Debbie Rochon and Doug Jones and I, we walk in. Doug Jones, we had exchanged a handshake. That was the extent of our, oh, hi, nice to meet you. That was it. We're about to go into the second haunt. And I'm like, oh my God, where's Debbie Rochon? And I go to grab her and she's gone in already and she's disappeared into the darkness. And I turn and there's Doug Jones. And I said, Mr. Jones, there's something very awkward I have to tell you. And he's like, oh, what is it, darling? And I said, I am terrified of these things. I don't want to go in there, but I have to. I'm probably going to hold you. Is that okay? Is it okay if I hold you? Is it okay if I maybe bury my face between your shoulder blades and keep my eyes closed? I'm asking this of a grown man I don't know. And he was like, darling, of course you can. Because he is honestly the sweetest person on the entire planet. So I walk through this thing with Doug Jones, and I was just buried inside of Doug Jones. I was hiding behind him. And that went on for like 12 more haunts. But something amazing happened. And I don't know if it's because he's such a wonderful person and he just gives off this energy, this aura of kindness. I just felt so safe around him and I felt so lovely around him that by the 12th one, or by the 13th one I should say, I was cured. I was completely cured and I've never been afraid of haunts ever since. I enjoy going to them now. And another really cool thing that happened at that haunt was that I realized that haunts are like Renaissance fairs for me. So I walk down the street all the time here in New York City. No one ever stops me and says, excuse me, are you Voltaire? But when I go to Renaissance fairs, people are like, my liege, you are but our favorite bard. And suddenly, like, I have tons of fans at Renaissance fairs. Apparently, my second biggest demographic is people who work at haunts. Because when I went through the Dracula haunt at Universal Theme Parks that year, there were 3 brides of Dracula in long flowing white dresses, and they came up to me and they were like, we are going to seduce you, and we're going to drink your blood. And they were doing their shtick that they do to everybody. And one leans in and says, and we love your music. What? So that was really cool. I found that out about haunts. But that is how I met Doug Jones. And then we went on the radio show. And I was able to talk about these haunts thanks to Doug and thanks to Debbie Rochon. And we had a really, really lovely time. And we stayed in touch. And, you know, I've been to LA a bunch of times. This was around the time where I was starting to go to LA more regularly. And Doug, it was just such a sweetheart. You know, a lot of people, they have busy lives and they're in Hollywood and blah, blah, blah. But Doug on many occasions came to the hotel to have dinner. And in retrospect, I feel like a cad because he would come and I would drink far too many mojitos. And he doesn't drink alcohol, so he'd be drinking a Rob Roy. And I'd probably just be getting more and more wasted and ridiculous. But what a lovely chap. And now he's on my favorite Star Trek series ever, Discovery, and it's such a joy to watch him. So that is the behind the scenes, that is the origin of what made me want to write this song. I wanted to tell the world not only how great he is as an actor, but how great he is as a person. And that is the origin of The Devil and Mr. Jones. And now we'll talk about the production. The Devil and Mr. Jones appears on my album Raised by Bats, which came out in 2014. There are some amazing players on this song and on this album. The drums were played by Brian Viglione, who's played the drums on almost every self-released album of mine. Bass was played by Emilio Zefkina, who I recruited from Peter Murphy's band. He was playing with Peter Murphy at the time. Great guy, great bass player. The incredible accordion work by Franz Nicolai, who I'd worked with on previous albums. And the angel is played by a young lady by the name of Julia Marcel. And boy, I wish I could tell you the story about how I came to know about her and how I met her, because that's also a really long and really lovely story. But I'm gonna save it for when I talk about another duet that she and I did on the album To the Bottom of the Sea called This Sea. Because it's a lengthy story, and I want to dedicate this episode entirely to Mr. Doug Jones. But I will say that after having done a cover of one of her songs, and then after doing a duet with her remotely while she recorded her parts in Poland and emailed them to me for that song This Sea, excuse me, she was finally coming to the United States of America. I was in the studio recording this. This was recorded at Planet Gray by George Grant, and this is when it was at the Greenpoint location. And she came to the studio. So I met her for the very first time. She is godlike, she is so beautiful, and she's so talented, and she just has such an incredible voice. And it was surreal. It was surreal to be in the studio with somebody that I am a fan of, and to, you know, sort of pinching myself like, she's really here, and I'm really singing with her. She's so incredibly lovely. And I guess she's sort of become something of like a rock singer. So when we were working on the album, one of the things that sticks out in my mind was that she said, is this kind of like a cabaret song? That's my awful Polish accent. Is this kind of like a cabaret song? That sounded more like Ukrainian. I don't know. Anyway, I said, yeah, I guess it's kind of like cabaret-like. And she's like, so I should sort of really do it very cabaret. And I was like, yeah. So I think maybe she thought she should like Liza Minnelli it up a bit, but man, she sounds so great on this album, and recording with her was such a pleasure. And I mixed, oh my God, I almost forgot, such an incredible part of the making of this song. The guitars are played by Ray Toro of My Chemical Romance. And I would love to tell you about how I met Gerard Way, which is another really long story. And through him, I met Ray Toro of My Chemical Romance. And he did not come to the studio in New York. I flew to Los Angeles. I recorded with him at the studio of Jason Charles Miller from Godhead, a good friend of mine. And I sat in the studio, and Ray Toro and I worked on Raised by Bats, the song Raised by Bats, the song Oh My Goth, and this song, which he plays kind of like this almost Spanish guitar sounding thing. What an incredibly lovely guy, so sweet. Everybody I've ever met from My Chemical Romance has been really, really nice, and Ray was no exception. And once it was finished being recorded, The Devil and Mr. Jones was mixed by Tom Gardner at the Cutting Room here in New York City. He did an incredible job mixing. Such an incredible job, in fact, that I said you should mix the entire album. And then since then I've recorded everything with him. And he's a great, great engineer. I recorded all of Heart-Shaped Wound with him and mixed it with him, and we are now working on the new album together. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing about The Devil and Mr. Jones. I hope it's answered all of your questions about the song, and if not, leave your questions in the comments below and I will answer them down there. Also, let me know what other songs of mine you'd like to hear on this series in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Song Meanings and Origins. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe so that you'll never miss another video on The Lair of Voltaire.